Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this corporate parenting panel. My name is Councillor Stephen Rowe and I'm chairman for this panel. I'd just like to welcome Councillor Richard Boothroyd and say he's always welcome to come and join us. Before we move on further with the main business of this meeting, can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website. And with this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public watching this live. I would like to begin with a health and safety announcement. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception into the front car park. We then need to wait in the car park until further instructions. At this point, may I remind you that mobiles, laptops and iPads should now be on silent mode for the duration of the meeting. If you wish to ask a question or make a statement, then please raise your hand. Please can you keep your questions and contributions succinct and concise. We'll now move into the formal agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence, replacement members. Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. We have received apologies from Councillor Mark Whittington and Councillor Cleo Perrotton-Williams.
Thank you very much. Item 2. Yes.
We also have apologies from Janice Spencer.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of members' interest. Do any members wish to declare an interest? No, thank you. Item 3, minutes of the panel meeting of the 7th July 2022. This item is to confirm the minutes of our previous meeting, which can be found on pages 3 to 8 of the agenda pack as a true record. Can I ask for a proposal? Oh, my apologies. We have an amendment. Yes, Rachel.
Can the records please reflect that I'm not interim head of service, I'm permanent. Thank you.
Fine. So with that, with that amendment, can I ask for a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Higgs. And a seconder? I'll second it. We will now vote on the minutes. You're voting on whether you agree that minutes are a correct record with the amendment. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillor and Lead Officers. I have no announcements. Rachel, do you have anything? Sorry.
No, nothing from me, thank you.
Rachel is with us because Janice is off elsewhere, I think is the way to put it. So we now move on to item 5, Children in Care Performance Measures Quarter 1, 2022-23, April to June 2022. This item is on page 9 to 32 of the agenda pack. The report will be presented by Rachel Freeman, Head of Services, Children in Care and Residential Estates. The panel is invited to consider the report and comment on the performance presented and recommend any actions or changes to the Executive Councillor for Children's Services, Community Safety and Procurement. And we'll take questions at the end. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Yep, this is the Quarter 1 report, which provides information that's relevant to the work of yourselves as a corporate parenting panel. So the full details are in the annex report, but I will summarise some of the measures. There are 15 measures in total, and 8 didn't meet their target, but 2 are ahead of the target. The ones that are not meeting their target, you will remember from previous meetings, there's nothing new pressing or no new emerging concerns that you need to be cited on, but I'll just touch on some of the rationales behind why some of those targets are not on track. So the first one being the average time between a child entering care and moving in with adoptive family, and this is still being impacted by the pandemic and some of the delays that we saw in terms of concluding court proceedings, etc. Things are moving forward now. We are starting to see that shift, so we are optimistic that that is an improving picture. The second one is the fostering and adoption of children in care aged 10 to 16, and this is just slightly under target. We are very fortunate in Lincolnshire in that most of our children are cared for in foster care settings. Again, we're still feeling the impact of the pandemic, where the number of foster placements available or families willing to take children in decreased for various reasons related to the pandemic and health, etc. We are seeing a gradual recovery of that, but it is going to take some time. A lot of our foster carers have now come back online, but I think as we've seen across the sector in general, a lot of people have reevaluated their lives, so it's still a challenge, but we have fantastic recruitment and retention activity ongoing for our current carers, and like I said, compared to other authorities, we do very well in Lincolnshire in keeping our children within foster care. The next one was participation of children in care reviews, and this is a cumulative measure that builds throughout the year. It's dropped slightly below target for the first quarter, and some of the reasons around that was there's some recording issues on Mosaic which has been identified that's being addressed. But again, this is something that we celebrate our success on, something that Ofsted have picked us up on, that we are very good at encouraging children to participate in whatever way they feel most comfortable in their reviews. And I think it's fair to say that the implementation of the use of things like Microsoft Teams and Zoom, etc., has enabled some children who previously wouldn't want to participate in their reviews to be more encouraged to participate, even if only for partly of the review. So again, that is just a slight dip below target, but not of great concern. The percentage of children with an up-to-date health check, again, the pandemic, as you will know, because we've discussed this in previous corporate parenting panels, the COVID pandemic impacted on the ability for us to access some healthcare, the health assessments in particular. We've also got a number of children in care who have reached the 16 to 17-year-old age group or reached an age whereby they have decided to decline their health assessment, and we've also seen a slight increase of this age group entering care for various reasons. So, and they are the ones that are most likely not to engage in their health assessment. So we're clear around the narrative of it. There's lots of activity to promote health assessments, and there's been a review of how the paperwork is processed through that Liz has been instrumental in, and it is an improving picture, but again we are still struggling due to the availability of appointments and the suitably qualified GPs, etc. So, which is also a national picture, but again, compared to our neighbours, we do perform well. Okay. So the next one is around the dental check, and again, it's a national challenge obtaining dental appointments. Many dentists have decided only to provide private dentistry. However, we do well in terms of getting our children in care access to emergency dental treatment as and when they need it, and also getting them registered with dentists. What we sometimes struggle with is getting those appointments on time. However, it is sitting at 71.1%, which is just a slight decrease from quarter 4. Our target is high at 95 and something that we are striving, but again, it is an ongoing challenge, but something that we are well aware of and continue to work together towards. And again, Liz is instrumental in supporting us with that. Next one is around immunisations, which was significantly impacted due to the pandemic, the schools closing, and then the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccinations. The majority of the overdue ones are the teenage boosters, which were undertaken in school. So again, the school closures impacted on those. And we have been given a trajectory of 18 months for that to get back on schedule. But again, it's still being impacted by pressures of emerging programmes of further vaccinations for COVID. So it's something to be aware of. But again, lots of activity. We have good communication with our health teams, and we are promoting this where we can, getting those children to those appointments as soon as we can. 16, 17-year-old children in care participate in learning. Again, this is something that we speak about a lot here, and it is below the lower target tolerance for performance, but just by 4%. And all of our 16 to 17-year-olds are supported by the virtual school, and you will have heard from Kieran in the past about that. They all have personal education planning processes, which brings everyone together to focus on their needs. Some of the struggles are around the trauma that they've experienced and their ability to actually engage in education. So sometimes it's about taking it at that child's pace, which might leave us below target, but if they're accessing some element of education, then we see that as that we're moving forward. So again, it's something that we work very hard on. We're very creative. Virtual school are fantastic in terms of thinking outside of the box and looking at what alternative curriculums and how different ways to engage children. So I think although we are below target, it's something that an issue that we're very live to and very proactive in trying to improve on. Similarly, for the care leavers in education, employment or training, you'll hear from Andy later on down in the agenda, but it is below target. It does fluctuate. It's currently at 54.3%, which is a slight increase. Again, we have really close working relationships with Leaving Care. They are on board with our vision of ensuring that every young person has the opportunity to engage in employment and training and understand the risks associated with young people who are not engaged, which are wide-ranging. They have done a survey in terms of trying to get the voice of the care leavers regarding the barriers. And again, this is what's coming through is, I think, some of the fallout from the pandemic around that isolation, poor mental health, that lack of social contact, and then it being very difficult to re-engage in that. So those are the areas that we're targeting on to support those young people, and confident we will continue to see improvements in that area. So those are the ones that we've not met. We've got 2 that we are ahead of the target. And this is really something to be proud of, and that is stability of placements for children in care. And this is around identifying children who experience 3 placement moves, which we would then see as, flagging as a concern as to why we can't sustain a placement for that child. We are above target on that one, which is hugely something to celebrate given the national shortage of foster placements and care placements in general. We do very well in Lincolnshire, and we have some fantastic foster carers who really show commitment to children throughout some very difficult times, including pandemic and school closures, etc. So it's not an easy target to maintain, but again, we are ahead of it. So I think that's something that you should all be aware of and be very proud of, as we are. And children in care cases which were reviewed, that's having their statutory child in care review within the required timescales. This is something that we always perform well on. We have good collaboration with social care and our partners to achieve this. Attendance at reviews is multi-agency and very good, and we are performing well ahead of target on this one. So that's it from me. I'm happy to open for any questions now.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions? Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. Rachel, I've got 3 questions, if I may. The first one concerns the percentage of children that are seeing the dentist and the response that we're getting from that. Are we having to pay effectively privately because it's so difficult to get NHS dentists these days? And if the council is paying privately for treatment, do we have effectively a den plan type policy that we have a block group account so that multiple children can see the dentist? So that's the first question anyway. The second one is that it mentions that we're slightly below the target with the 10 to 16-year-olds for adoption. What happens to the age group below that? Do we have a problem with that, or is it easier to get younger children fostered out than older children. So I'll leave it at that, if I may.
Okay, thank you. So the first question, we have on occasion paid for private dental treatment where we've been unable to secure that for children. We don't have a den plan arrangement in place. It's not something that's been suggested before. Generally, what we do find is we are able to access dental treatment for children. We're just struggling to do it within the time frames that enable us to meet the target. So we don't have children that are suffering with poor dental health at all. Access to emergency dental treatment is something that we always achieve when it's needed. Orthodontistry has been a bit of a challenge, so there's been occasions where we've paid privately for that initial appointment to get the child seen, and then they've been able to secure the NHS one. But I don't think we've got the demand there to require us to think about setting up a private den plan. It's meeting the target that is a bit tricky in terms of delivering dental treatment in Lincolnshire. We are achieving that, and please be assured we don't have children out there with poor dental health. All our children do get to be seen and do get dental health care when they need it. The second question, which, yeah, I think that was perhaps something in the way I read out what the target is, because children over the age of 10 are not usually suitable to go for adoption for various reasons. They've got strong family links with their birth families, etc. So we do very well in adoption for our under 6 generally, yeah, which you'll hear from Anne shortly around that. But so that target is mainly about foster placements, keeping that age group of children in foster placements, which we strive to do, because we in Lincolnshire we believe every child is fosterable, and we try to avoid going out to residential care and keeping them within a family setting where possible. But for some children, residential is more appropriate, meets their needs. Some children, as they get older, cannot accept a family environment to live in because they're very much aligned and still feel very loyal to their birth family. So it's difficult to quantify, because it's a figure that you can't split it out in saying how many children have we got in residential care that should be in foster care, etc. So those that are in residential care need to be in that setting, which might sometimes pull us out of that target, if that makes sense.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Matthews.
I continue to remain interested in the 16 to 17-year-olds not engaged in education and care leavers not engaged in education. But I'm interested in the phrases you use, and that's what I was trying to quote you. The performance was 81% compared to a target of 90, and yet you've said that we failed by 4. So that means, although the target's 90, there's a tolerance. So basically, 8 out of 10 children aren't engaged in education. And you use the phrase, they struggle to access learning. Now, is that our responsibility or their responsibility? But wait, because I want to link that to my second question, which is the care leavers. Half of our children aren't, half of the care leavers aren't involved in education, employment or training, despite us working really hard. And this is not a reflection on the efforts of us to engage with them. But it talks about mental well-being, substance abuse, trauma. And when we talk about the 16 and 17-year-old, we talk about requiring therapeutic support. Now, it sounds like we've got a really poorly group, of which half of them, by the time they're 18, can't access the important tools to survive in life. And it talks about a lack of qualifications in that care leavers group. In the in-care group, they're struggling to access learning. I'm really intrigued by this, because it sounds like we've got the worst kids in the whole world in our care, and despite us working really hard, it ain't working. So what can we do differently?
I mean, we certainly haven't got the worst kids in the world in our care. I think sometimes struggling to access education full time might be a better way of kind of thinking about it, because education is to access education full time is quite intense, and often these children have not had consistent education before they come into care, and with the trauma they've experienced. We have fantastic wraparound support from CAMS, Healthy Minds. We have therapeutic trained workers within our fostering and adoption service. So there's lots of work that goes that's ongoing with these young people, often for many years, trying various different approaches, different therapies to support them to access education. But sometimes it isn't enough, and it might be what we find with our care leavers. They've hit 18, but actually emotionally they're not quite there yet. So some of them are not really ready for that adult life, and that's why we wrap so much support around them as care leavers and try and continue to give them opportunities. Sometimes it's about time and maturity. I'm sure Kieran's got something he would want to add in terms of the support that we offer for the 16 to 17-year-olds. It's a very difficult age, as I'm sure you all appreciate anyway, for young people. But I think we do very well. We celebrate a lot of success, and whilst we might not have academic qualifications per se, there are other achievements that our young people do achieve that might not tick that box, but still we would still celebrate that as a success. Kieran, is there anything you'd want to add?
Yeah, in terms of access and learning, if I could maybe use one case in point of a youngster who we worked with last year, who we ultimately ended up being really quite successful with. But I think it's important to understand that the impact of life experience on these young people doesn't always hit people in the same way. So it's a very complex issue. It really is complex. And life is a challenge for many of our young people. Many of them meet the challenge without any difficulty. Others, with less challenge, struggle. You know, that's just the way it is. But there was one individual, and we are talking about small numbers of young people relatively. And we've got a cohort of about 150 kids that fit into this 16, 17-year-old. In the cohort generally of young people across the county, it's a tiny number. But ultimately, typically, if I could say, the experience of those young people who aren't accessing education is that they've come through a route where they've come into care fairly late, maybe 14, 15, with a history of non-attendance in mainstream school. The case in point that I'm thinking, this young person, before he was 8, 11, he had 11 changes of school. So his parents were basically trying to avoid social care, and they were chasing that and running away from that. And it's very often about these young people, what they've missed. So if you could think of education as a conveyor belt, when you miss a lot of opportunities early in life around communication and language, the conveyor belt keeps on going. And ultimately, our young people miss out on that. So going back to this young person, he attended a special school, didn't do any GCSEs because special school students don't generally sit GCSEs, had a long history of exclusion, non-engagement with social care, engagement with residential staff, went into post-16, and basically was traumatised in all sorts of ways from his experience of the journey into care. And despite engaging with this young person for 12, 14 months where he refused to get out of bed, was abusive to social workers, abusive to residential carers, he eventually did wake up and smell the coffee and engage with us and accessed an employability course, and is actually working at this point in time. So that's not untypical. So I suppose what I'm saying is that sometimes our young people, unfortunately, are square pegs in round holes. What we endeavour to do, they're not ready for at a particular point in time. They do refuse to cooperate with us. They do see that they know best. What teenager doesn't? So, I mean, in many ways, they're very typical of a group of teenagers who would not cooperate with an adult who would tell them what to do. That's not unusual, So I suppose in terms of our young people, it's understandable that more of them would engage in that kind of behaviour as opposed to the non-looked after cohort. So it's a very interesting picture. It is one whereby these young people do struggle to fit into mainstream school. They struggle to fit into special school. They struggle to fit into AP. They're excluded quite a lot from school. They've missed out on a lot of learning early in life around communication and language. And, you know, many of them still carry on and become engaged in learning later and actually become, you know, independent young people who can stand on their own 2 feet. Not all of them, but many of them do. So I suppose what I'm saying is that it's sometimes just grabbing the opportunity with these young people to say, you know, are you ready to do this? And they can very often turn around and say, yes, we are. So it's a mixed picture. It's a challenging world to work in. They don't achieve academically in the way that the normal population do, for want of a better phrase. But they do eventually come around and begin to engage and work with us if they can. It's not always possible to do that at that moment in time within the window of being 16 and 17, 16, you know, 16 to 18 years of age. So, yeah, that's generally the picture for those young people who don't engage.
I hear what you're saying, and I know you're working hard, but the figures would indicate that as corporate parents, we're failing these children because 8 out of 10 aren't accessing education at 16, and 1 in 2 is not in employment educational training, despite the phenomenal resources we're putting in. So my question is, and it's not a question that we're not working hard or we don't care or we don't have these one-off histories, is our approach the right approach? And is there another approach? And I've asked this question several times that we could look at. And I know that geographically they're diverse, but I'm intrigued to know if there are hotspots in here of geographical areas where it's not working. Of course, they can't get to a school because actually the bus might be in the way. Something just doesn't look right here. And if you compare it with national statistics for not children in care, these are bad figures. And we've got to try to level that playing field. And what can we do more is my question.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's a really valid question, and it's one that we're endeavouring to address at this point in time. And it's one of the reasons why we've engaged in the DFE post-16 pilot. You know, what do we do with those kids who don't get qualifications? And we're looking to work to see if we can actually look at things like, for instance, work experience, trying to get things that can fit the young people, to engage them, to get them to learn the skills that they can actually go on and pursue a career in whatever they might choose to do. So we're looking at that at this point in time. We're trying to provide some additional resources post-16, which we've had to rob Peter to pay Paul because the funding wasn't available for post-16 up to this point. So those kids participating, not participating post-16 have traditionally not been funded by the DFE. That we have not been funded to support them, basically. So we're looking to actually engage in the pilot to make sure that that is the case. And there is a question here around how people access employment and qualifications and apprenticeships that I'm afraid is way above my pay scale, because it's a national issue. What do we do with those 40% of kids who don't get the qualifications at GCSE, who don't get the level 2 qualifications? So that's a question even outside of children who are in care, because there's a whole number of young people who don't reach GCSE qualifications, who don't get that gold standard, who actually struggle to go on and get employment. So there's an issue there also. And I think that national review is something that, yeah, I would welcome. But I think that's the framework that we have to work through, is that you get your qualification, you go on to employment, yeah. If you don't get the qualification, you're going to follow a different pathway. So I think that whole thing needs to be looked at again.
Can we make representation to this so far unformed national review?
Well, the issue is that we work within a structure that we work within, whereby, you know, the GCSE qualification is the gold standard. That indicates that you go on to do a certain level of qualification at post-16, which indicates that you go on and you go to college or you go to university or whatever it is, you go on to a job, a professional role, whatever that might look like. That's how the education system works, essentially.
I get that. So what I'm saying, can we make representation to change that? But secondly, that deals with education, but there's also employment and training. And there must be worthwhile and valid opportunities for these young people who, as you say, have woken up and smelled the coffee and wish to engage. And there must be some scope locally for us to find routes to employment and training that are not formally linked to education and that bar that you put in as, you know, your GCSEs in maths and English.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of employment and training, that's more Andy's end of things in terms of care leavers. But yeah, absolutely. But we are looking to work more effectively together. I think that would be fair to say. I think that we are looking to be innovative in terms of our approach. I think that the realisation that our young people don't get the qualifications at GCSE is something that we just have to realise, and we have to find a way forward. But that will engage a full corporate responsibility across LTC to actually engage with employers to ensure that they are prepared to take our kids on without qualifications. That's a big ask. So it's kind of beyond, again, it's kind of beyond my remit here. It's almost, I think in some ways it's a corporate decision that needs to be made. But certainly I would love to see a pathway whereby our young people who don't make the qualifications at GCSE can access apprenticeships across Lincolnshire. But I think that that's something that, you know, is a strategic thing that will cost money, that will require resource, and that hasn't been allocated to at this point in time. So certainly if you could advocate for that, I would be really pleased to see that happen.
I think we're on the same page, Kieran. What I'd like you to do is to make the proposals that will work in Lincolnshire that we can consider and that we can support, because clearly we are corporate parents. We want the absolute best for these children, and at the moment I think we're failing them, not because of a lack of wish or effort or well-being, but I know Andy's spoken about the fact that Lincolnshire County Council has taken on apprentices who have come through this route, and there must be other people. If we had a Lincolnshire vision and policy drive, and I'm pretty sure that if something was put to the council to address that, then we would be able to move in that direction. And there are some fairly significant politicians who have gone down this route who would back us as well.
Okay, so we are looking at that, but I think it's small steps at this point in time. Firstly, I've only had the funding to look at this area since June, and that's funding that's only been provided through the DFE. I am currently engaged with Justin Brown and his team, who have access into the LEP, etc., etc. But again, this will take time. We're building links with Bernardo's and Leaving Care around how we can further bolster these young people to support them going forward. But we will only make a difference on the margins, Councillor Matthews. We will only make small steps with individual young people. It won't be, you know, a huge step forward. But I do think that we can make progress, and I think we definitely need to focus on this. But it will be an 18-month to 2-year programme. I think it won't happen straight away.
Kieran, they're our children. One of the other things that springs up is that you talked about that young person who'd had an experience of coming through special schools and changing schools. Special schools are businesses now, and surely we can engage with them because they're failing, and we have to pick up their failings as well in that emotional journey through life. But I just don't want us to take our foot off the pedal. And I do think the County Council should have a corporate responsibility because this is their lives. Okay, so I'm with you, but I'm not happy with where we're at the moment.
Nor am I.
I understand that, but it's got to be aired. Okay.
Councillor Matthews' subject is very much on education, and I recognise that. We have 2 ladies with us that do fostering, and I'm just wondering, without putting you too much on the spot, can you share any examples of where accessing education is a difficulty? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be happy to, because it's a conversation I've had this morning. I've got a 16-year-old with me at the moment who's been in care since he was 7, 8. He's been with me for 15 months. And hearing your point, and I like the point that they are our children, even though he's been in care the length of time that he has, from his perspective, he is still very much his parents' children. And so we are a family home. We're a fostering family where my son is at university. I have a care leaver still on staying put with me who is also at university. So education is important to us. It is part of how we are as a family. From his perspective, he is still very much with his family in his head, and that is his biggest barrier. So when we try and talk about education, when we try and talk about employment, it's, well, my mum and dad have done all right, and they didn't get any education. My mum and dad have done all right, and they haven't got any qualifications. So for all that the fostering services are putting in place to support him, and he has been offered, and those opportunities have been there for him, it's not where he sees himself. And so regardless of how we view him, it's about how he views himself. And there is only so much that we can do to change that. And it's been a long process. You know, he's been offered therapeutic work throughout his time in care. But that is one of his biggest barriers. He sees himself as a child in care, and so sees himself as different from his peers, and he hasn't engaged through school because he doesn't want anyone to know he's a child in care. But he actually said to me this morning, I wish I could go back a year. So he's just started at college, but he actually did say this morning, I wish I could go back a year and be resitting year 11, because it would be a bit different. But that's the struggle that we have. And I don't know how we go about changing that. We're doing our best, and he's in an environment where it's being demonstrated on a daily basis. But change needs to come from him.
Kieran will correct me, but we're fully engaged with CAMS. And if that's an identifiable trait, which is really interesting to learn, then there must be some programs or support or counselling that can be targeted to address those concerns. Not through me, and you know, it's not the put the arm around the shoulder, be all right, then sort it out. That needs some professional engagement to address that specific concern, because if that's the block to access is his own self-image.
Could I just bring in and just advise us to just be careful that we don't identify the person. So any suggestions around that particular case, then maybe we ought to take outside the room. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because I tend to foster younger children. So obviously when they're in the early education system, and I've had children that have gone on through the education system, but often until they feel safe in that learning environment, they can't learn to their full potential. And that is like what I've really found is the starting point. You've got to address the trauma, you know, because when they're sitting in that, they may dissociate from the learning, they may have 100,000 things going through their minds about what's happening with their birth family, and until all those things are addressed, they will not learn to their full potential. And it is about making them feel safe and in that environment. And I think that is a starting point.
Andy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just very briefly. I just wanted to kind of pick up on the word. We've got some of the worst. I think we've got some of the most remarkable kids in our care. They're absolute survivors. A lot of our young people's experience would crush every other person in normal life. A little bit emotional. But, you know, these kids survive. They really do, day to day, hand to mouth. And when they're 17, 18, 19 years old, actually living is the daily challenge for them. Dealing with the fact that the person that's supposed to love you most abused them or hurt them is in the forefront of their mind. That's the key. So actually the fact that over half of these kids go to school is outstanding achievement. Actually, the other 40%, we're trying to put their lives back together with them. And that's the vulnerability. That's what they're challenged with. And I don't think we're failing our children at all. I think we have amazing resources, amazing staff, incredible foster carers. I've just paid for 2 kids to do their master's degree. They're 25. There's no funding for that person. But at the age of 25, that's when they're ready. Children in life are ready at 16, 17, our children. Our looked after children get ready later in life. The penny drops later, which is why the leaving care service was extended to the age of 25. So we can pick them up at 21, 22, 23. And actually, a third of the reason why a third of the kids coming back for information, advice and guidance at the age of 22 and 23 was about getting back into education. We don't measure that. So I think what we need to do is look at the statistic, but think about the individual child. These are individual lives. These are individual people making individual choices. And these big carte blanche kind of broad brush approaches of big capital funding and great organisations and great plans need to make difference to individual children who have their own hopes, fears, thoughts, aspirations, and know that the person that's supposed to love them most did the most harm to them. And that is the context. And that for me is, and I think they're incredible, the fact that they're still alive and they're dragging themselves across the line every day with their foster carers and our leaving care workers is just amazing. And I think they're some of the best kids in the world.
I absolutely believe you. And I absolutely believe you. But there is something wrong here where there is a set of criteria or statistics or data where we're not meeting our targets, where things aren't going ahead. So and it's probably, I don't think I've criticised us in terms of the effort, but we're not achieving in performance. But it would appear that we achieve in performance later on, or we have, whether these are outliers in terms of the data. But these are government set statistics and criteria. Is that right?
That's the problem.
And have we fed that information back to them with our data and our evidence and our case study that either we're asking the question too early, and it's not about whether they're 7 or whether they're 17, it's how long they've been in the process in the system to become damaged and then to recover from that damage. But all I'm responding to is what's in front of me here, and it's not reflecting the efforts and the work. But why should we keep banging our head against the brick wall in failing targets when actually we have got a really good story to tell? And that's why I'm asking, can we make representation to other people to address this, but not take our, it can't just be, you know, hugging and loving. There's got to be some challenge, but this is not working. This continual, it's a rod for your back. It's not an appropriate rod based on the work you're doing. So that's all. I just don't know what we can do to deliver that message back from Lincolnshire County Council, that we are bending over backwards to accommodate these children in education and that we have successes, but these criteria are not fitting them well to show their success. And that also can't help their case study, can't help their own individual views. Stop now. Yes, sorry.
Thank you. I've got 3 questions, but Catherine Matthews has covered one of them. When I read page 3, there was comments about 7 young people in custody, and it made me realise that we actually get no feedback into this panel with regard to. It just says 7 people in custody. It doesn't say anything else. We get that's in custody. We don't know the examples of what's happening, and in custody could be that they've done absolutely nothing. It could be that they've done something. So I don't know whether we could have better stats here or whether it's a totally different conversation. I appreciate it's one we've got to be careful with, but I think it was one that I think we need to look at and see if we can address it, possibly at a future stage. So I wouldn't look for you, Rachel, to say, yes, we can do this, and unless you want to comment.
I just wonder whether it would be for the YOS Management Board, the Youth Offending Management Board, maybe to present a paper about the way that the Youth Justice Services work with young people and are looked after children and are care leavers that are in the criminal justice system. Again, we're going to be careful not to be too case specific, but maybe Andy Cook and the Yacht Management Board could do just kind of a presentation about how that works and the dispensations and the way we engage with looked after children.
I think it's important, though, that we understand whether it's a problem, an increasing problem or a decreasing problem. Yes, Rachel?
I think something to help the panel understand the nature of that work. But just to say, those children, was it 7, did you say? Yeah. 7 children, they, in most likelihood, became looked after because they went into custody. They were not and obviously I don't know the names, but I know that we don't have any children in care and custody at the moment. So it's not the case that they were our children that then got taken into custody. Very often they are children not known to us, or children supported through under a different plan that have ended up in custody. And custody could be a very short period of time, and it obviously depends on when the data is extracted as to the number that you will get. So it could be that someone was in custody for 24 hours and then they're no longer in custody. So there is a narrative around it, but just to assure everyone, they're not all our children that have entered custody.
So this could just be highlighting a problem that's not a problem. Yeah, okay. I think it's one to talk about at another stage. Yeah, thank you. The other thing was that page 16, we have a comment that says the target has remained the same for this year. There has been a delay in court proceedings that will have impact on our average days over the next year. And this is on the question about the average time between local authority receiving court authority to place a child and the local authority deciding on matching that child. Surely court delays wouldn't affect post-court decisions. This is about the gap between the decision and the match for that child. So delays in court proceedings shouldn't make a difference unless I'm misunderstanding the story. Anne, was you going to answer that?
Yes,
thank you.
Please, if I may. The measure that refers to is literally from the date the child comes into care until the date that they're placed with the doctors. So care proceedings affect it greatly because the whole of the period of the care proceedings is included in that measure. And we can't place a child until we have a placement order. So the fact that care proceedings have slowed down in courts for perfectly understandable reasons over the period of COVID has slowed things down. It hasn't slowed everything down forever, but we would estimate something like an 8 to 12 week plateau, I suppose you could say. And that was affected also the way in which we matched children. Because those first 6 to 8 weeks of COVID, we actually weren't able to move any children until we could ascertain whether that was safe, what sort of risk assessments we needed. And I don't think we're alone in that. Most local authorities were in that situation. Because if you recall, the first part of COVID was it's only going to be for 3 weeks. And personally, I naively thought it would be for only 3 weeks. And then it was for another 3 weeks and then another 3 weeks. By the 6-week point, we recognised that we couldn't just do nothing, and children did still need to move. But they needed to move safely with COVID risk assessments. And we had foster carers who were shielding. We had all sorts of considerations that we had to make. So it's left us with what will be an 8 to 12 week lag in that year, which will roll because the children who are adopted in this report were from the preceding 2 years. So next year's report will also be affected. Does that make sense?
To me, it reads that the heading is incorrect because it says average time between the local authority receiving court authority. Is the court authority not the decision? It's saying that this is between getting authority, so I assume at that point the court has finished, yes, and then we're moving the child on. So the comment about the target is not correct because the court's finished. Yeah.
Well, except that there's a high number of parents contesting the decisions, which we then have to wait for. Sometimes a placement order isn't a placement order for a long time. I'm sorry, I've answered the question wrongly because I didn't put it in front of me. But that 6 to 8 week lag will have affected all of those children post-COVID potentially, because they will all have slowed down. Do you see what I mean?
No, I understand. So really, whereas in my mind I was taking court authority as that's the be all and end all, it's not. It can be challenged,
Exactly.
which would then extend the times. Yeah, I'm with you now. Thank you, Anne. Yes, Rachel.
This was a target that we met, because the target was 175 and our figure was 167, so it was we was in target.
The comment wasn't about whether we achieved it or not. It was about the comments that were backing it up. Didn't make sense to me.
I understand,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. That's great. Thank you. So, excuse me. I move that the panel receives and endorses the report, and that we are satisfied with the performance reported and the assurance and reasoning provided on areas where the targets have been achieved. I also request that our comments and recommendations from the debate are taken under consideration, and that items and potential topics for further discussion in future meetings are added on this panel's work programme as captured. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in agreement, please? Okay, thank you very much. So that's unanimous. Yes, Councillor Matthews.
We have commented. Can we just find out, there must be like a national body of people who care about things, who have annual conferences and things like that. And we must have a representative at that conference. And then I want to know the route into challenging these measures, or the addition of additional measures, whether it's Ofsted or whether it's blah, blah, blah. And I think we need to find that out, because we're all upsetting ourselves here about things where actually we should be celebrating success. And it's no good month after month after month meeting and doing those things. We've got to challenge the system that allows us to be seen to be failing when we're succeeding.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 6 is the adoption annual report. This item on pages 33 to 98 of the pack provides the panel with an update on the position of the adoption service through the annual report and statement of purpose. This report will be presented by Anne Johnson, Team Manager, Adoption. The panel is invited to consider the report and comment on the report and statement of purpose. Thank you. Thank you, Anne.
Okay. I hope you've all had the opportunity to have a look at the report, and I'm sorry it is quite a lengthy one. I think overall it's been a good year in the circumstances. I've noted 6 things that I thought were worthy of mention. Firstly, there was an increased number of children with adoption plans, so there were 56 children as opposed to 49 in the previous year. That meant that we had more children who we were looking to place, and that's an indication that COVID hadn't had such a poor impact on things. We continued to place children in a timely way as best as possible, and we've had very few children waiting over the whole of the last 2 to 3 years. I can recall a situation after the public, the PLO, the public law order. We were looking for placements for over 50 children. We had a lot of children who we were family finding for. We gradually brought that down, and we now never have more than 10 children who we're family finding for. So that's been very positive. We've had a continuation of the increase in the number of families who are benefiting from therapeutic work from the Adoption Support Fund. And this links a little bit into what Councillor Matthews was just talking about, because certainly there's recognition by the government in the regulations of the Adoption Support Fund that these children have suffered significant harm, will continue to have to deal with that through their lives, and the Adoption Support Fund, it will fund young people until they're 25. So within that regulation there is a recognition of the fact, because these they're certainly not the worst children. We have some really great children, but they are the children who are significantly harmed. And that's without exception. Almost all of them are coming through the courts. So there are recognitions within other government, within some of the government departments, that those things need to be noted. And we also support young people who are in further education at 25. Not very many at university, but quite a large number who are at college and still have financial support because they're at college at 25. We've had, in last year, there were 322 applications for therapy, and £837,000 was provided by the Adoption Support Fund. Not all of that will have been spent because sadly sometimes people do withdraw from therapy, they don't want to continue, in which case then that money is returned. So that's the money that we were granted, not the actual spend. We had 31 adoption orders last year, which was up 2 on the previous year, and 69 special guardianship orders, which is back up to the figures that, because we'd had a lull in those over a couple of years, but that's back up again. There were less sibling groups adopted last year, and all of the children last year were under 6 years old. I mean, we don't have a great deal of control over which children are coming through. In the year that I'm working on at the moment, looking at the up and coming children, we've got a lot of sibling groups. But some years, the years differ and alter, and that makes placements easier or more difficult depending. 27 adoptive families were approved for children last year, and that was 2 up on the previous year. We have had adopters waiting for the last 2 years, and I think we're managing that fairly well. As you can imagine, it's quite difficult for adopters to be waiting, but it is a child-led service, and we're looking for the best family for a child. We're not looking for the best child for a family, and that has to be remembered. And we keep regular contact with people and try to manage their waiting times. But it's good for the children that we've got adopters waiting, much better than not having. We've made fantastic progress in the region. We're now 6 local authorities within Family Adoption Links, which is our regional adoption agency. We've now got shared family finding across the whole region, and that's been really good and quite exciting. We've had 1 adoption activity day, which is where adopters who are wanting children go and meet children who are in need of families, and from that day there were 6 expressions of interest, and I think there have been a few links. We're regularly meeting in-house and then monthly have a family finding meeting across the region. So that is having some impact. Unfortunately, it's still early days to tell, and we still do need to buy placements out of county for children with special needs or sibling groups or older children. We've got an integrated training site, integrated training plan for all adopters, and that's all on our website and bookable through Eventbrite. So quite a lot of smarter working going on. We've got a new website, new marketing strategies. We've got regular events of adoption information evenings, which are being done online, and using sort of hybrid forms wherever we can to kind of explore the sort of breadth of, because obviously we're now Leicestershire, Northamptonshire, which is a big geographical county, Lincolnshire, and Rutland, and North Links. So that's a very big geographical area. It's important that we're bringing people in. virtually where we can. Yeah, so we've learned quite a lot from what we did in the in COVID times, has sort of pushed us forward to make best use of those sort of virtual facilities. So, any questions?
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies for being late. Unfortunately, the road conditions were not great this morning, so I was in the car for 3 hours, I promise. So just expanding on where you were talking about the family adoption links then. So obviously it's been going since October 2020. So how are you quantifying the success of that partnership in terms of what it actually achieves? Because presumably it's costing us as an authority to be a part of that process. And where does it get scrutinised, as in terms of the work that actually goes on in that partnership?
The partnership is overseen by a board. So our representative on the board is Janice Spencer. So everything goes to the board, and each of the authorities has a senior member of staff who is on the board. I'm not sure that it is costing us any money. We've put an amount from our budgets, but from existing budgets, as I understand it, into a pot which pays for the head of service for the RAA, who at the moment is John Harrison, doing it part-time. How are we going to prove that it's working? Well, the two appointments that we have, three appointments, but two are very crucial for the region. One is a marketing officer who has designed the website, put everything together, and collates, you know, like she can tell you how many views you've had, how long people have spent on the website, comparing that with other national competitors, etc. And then we've got Benjamin, who's a data person who's come into the region. And so that's a work in progress, but we already have lots of data being collected so that we can actually see where we're up to. We can see some reduction in the out-of-county placements that we've had to purchase as a region. We can see whether children were placed what we call in-house. When I say in-house, I mean Lincolnshire, or within the RAA, which would be a free placement. We can see who have been better placement providers and who have been authorities with requirements for placement. So there will be some overview when we've moved into another year. We'll be able to see whether it is actually costing us money or not, because it's not money, but it's placements usually. Do you see what I mean? So, like Lincolnshire may have provided 3 or 4 placements for other parts of the region, and that might not always balance up at the end of every year. But we're not there yet where we can actually see who are the net providers. Is that helpful?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I would push back in terms of cost, because obviously there is a cost to anything we do as an authority, and obviously Janice's time is very valuable to us as an authority. So, is it an effective partnership, or is it just a data sharing organisation? And I suppose in terms of the rest of the country, do they have similar models like this that operate in this way?
Yes. Well, I was going to say I'm very positive about the partnership, but it wasn't a choice. The government laid this out, and I mean it started in October, but it's been going on for 5 years preceding that, for discussions and various debates. I mean, the government said that by I think it was October 2020, everyone had to be part of, so almost everyone is part of one, but it has good reason, which is about pooling resources, pooling expertise and skills, and trying to make sure that we can place children as effectively as possible. I mean, I think it's always difficult because we were always good at that, and not everybody was always good at that. But our performance hasn't gone down as a result. And
I know our background, you know, our history and background as an authority is excellent, and obviously, you know, we can't take that away from us. And I think it's fantastic where we are. I was just more interested really in terms of where it is and what it's doing and what it will go into the future. So no, thank you for that.
I think I'd take it one step further than Councillor Cook. I think I'd like for us to be able to see who are the net providers and who is, shall we say, living off maybe our expertise, so we know whether whether this is working for us as a whole. So we'd like to see, are we bringing more children into our people that are adopting than pushing out. I accept that a bigger area has to be better, because you've got a far better chance of matching a child with a parent. But I think it's important that we know whether we're on a positive or negative track. If we're on a negative track, then obviously actions need to be taken to help the people that are putting us on a negative track to improve them. So I think it would be good at some stage to get some feedback, maybe after the next set of stats are done, of how effective it is for who and where. Do we have any other questions? No? Thank you very much, Anne. Find where I'm at. I would now, I move that we receive the report and statement of purpose presented, and that we are satisfied with the efforts made by our adoption service in the past year. And I ask that our comments from the discussions as recorded are taken under consideration, and that we get some form of feedback on the positives and negatives of how it's affecting Lincolnshire. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement, please? Okay, great. That is unanimous. So we now move on to agenda item 7, which is the Fostering Annual Report 2021-2022. This item on page 99 to 152 of the PVAC provides the panel with an update of the position of the fostering service through the annual report and statement of purpose. The report will be presented by Nicola Brangham, Fostering Team Manager, and Rebecca Dolman, Fostering Team Manager. The panel is invited to consider the report and comment on the report and statement of purpose. Over to Nicola and Rebecca. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. As I say, I'm Nicola Brangham, the team manager from Fostering South, and Rebecca and I will be presenting this morning to you. Hopefully you've all had an opportunity to read the report that's presented, but what I wanted to do this morning was just to really kind of go through some of the highlights for you. So when we're looking at the period of 1st of April 2021 to the end of March 22, I think the most important thing to highlight really is the national picture in terms of where fostering has been at during this period, and particularly around in recognition that the number of children in care in Lincolnshire has increased round about circa 8%. And when we look at our stats with in the national picture, this is what we're seeing across the board, so this is not unusual. But first of all, I want to kind of celebrate some of these figures. And obviously, 735 children in care is a concern. But what I can say is that in Lincolnshire, we're incredibly proud of the fact that 499 of those children have been placed in our foster placements. So that, first of all, I'd like to thank our foster carers for that. Obviously, you know, when I came here a year ago, we were just literally coming back into offices and coming back out again. Here we are a year later, and I'm reporting on obviously this period of time. This period of time we're reporting on still remained a difficult period of time for fostering, and that has to be recognised. And I just want to say a huge thank you to all of our foster carers who have continued to support us and our children in Lincolnshire, because this has been no mean feat. So in terms of where we're at, I think I'd want to highlight to you that our online community has remained incredibly positive and has developed throughout this period of time. In terms of our performance, you can see on page 104, if I can refer you there, that at the end of March we had 289 foster carer households registered. And I also want to highlight and celebrate the fact that within that cohort we had 57 Regulation 24, or what we call connected persons and friends and family foster carers. These are people who don't get up in the morning and see our adverts to come and foster for Lincolnshire. They are people who put themselves forward when we're in care proceedings to offer a safe family placement for our children. So I want to recognise the support that all of those carers have provided to us. When we look at our statistics, what's noticeable is that we recruited 20 new mainstream households who were able to provide up to 40 placements. And, you know, this is quite remarkable, really. And I think, you know, we've touched on this morning the fact that people have been re-evaluating their lives. Things have looked very different. Lots of people have embraced our online media presence, shall we call it, and Rebecca will go on to talk about our recruitment activities in a little while, because that's really been quite exciting. But this has remained a challenging period, and I think I just wanted to also highlight for you, really, in terms of the national picture, as again, you know, the State of the Nation report has highlighted that across the UK we have over 45,000 fostering families who are supporting children. Within Lincolnshire, obviously, our priorities are to continue to provide high quality foster placements and to ensure that our foster carers are supported, trained, developed and retained. One of the things that I would like to highlight as well is that this period has allowed for further engagement with our foster carers and with our champions, who have been excellent in supporting us. And we've also identified where we've had instances where foster carers, for example, have decided to leave, or for a variety of reasons which have been listed on page 104. We've been able to look at what actually supports foster carers to stay with Lincolnshire. What is it that makes the difference? And ultimately, it's our support, our community and our retention offer which is making the difference. And Rebecca will talk further around the retention as well. But our foster carers, they provide a range of different placements for us and for our children, in terms of whether this be short-term placements, long-term placements, might be short breaks, might be, you know, a weekend respite. We've identified throughout this period of time, and, you know, I said it last year when I came, that, you know, our foster carers have worked incredibly hard during the pandemic. We've recognised that they do need support and those respites, and you will see that we have further campaigns out to seek that further support. So in terms of where we are now, we've adapted in terms of our recruitment campaigns and our retention models as well. You will also see in the report, and I know you've touched on this morning, talking about young people and their education, etc. And I hope you've had an opportunity to look at the staying put figures. And obviously, I would reiterate that that's an incredibly important measure for our children and young people in terms of being able to provide them that ongoing support as they move towards independence and increase those opportunities for their futures. As I say, the picture at the end of the year, whilst we've recruited 20 new mainstream carers, obviously we have sadly lost some carers, but we have worked proactively over the last year. And Rebecca, I think you'll talk about some of those key measures that we've taken. In comparison to other local authorities, we are doing very well, and I'm quite happy to take any particular questions on any aspects of the report.
Thank you. Have we got any questions? Yes, Councillor Cole.
Thank you. You mentioned about you were going to mention about recruitment and I presume our comms plan and social media and Instagram and all of that lots. And I think the only thing I would say is it takes, I think, dare I say it, for a normal person to follow a local authority on Instagram is probably quite something. So I suppose, how are you identifying and managing to reach people to get them to sign up as such? Because I know if I say to some of my friends, oh, you should follow the council, they'd think I'm mad.
Can I answer that, if that's okay? I think when we had an introduction of our new practice supervisor within the fostering service in July, what we did a performance audit and an internal audit on our recruitment and our retention, and we also looked at our marketing strategy. We now have a new marketing worker within our team, and we've actually looked at a lot of the evidence in terms of where do we get our requests from, where do we get our interest from. And from that audit, we've been able to identify our target areas. So in terms of the hits and when we get most hits on social media, we've also invested really highly in terms of the local community, because we see that's really important for Lincolnshire children to be placed with Lincolnshire families. We've gone out to local councils, to local businesses who are really on board and supporting Lincolnshire Fostering Service. They support our social media platform. Just to give you an example, when we first started up our social media, we had 5,000 hits a month. We are now reaching 27,000 hits a month, which is significant growth. And I think that's about just getting out there, building those relationships with our local community, and that's really supported that. So they will support us with sharing our social media presence. We have businesses locally that have invested in fostering, so they are offering lots of discounts to foster carers, but are also, from that, it sends a hit to the social media site that sends links to fostering, which again has increased those inquiries. We've embedded the foster-friendly employers, so we've had lots of spreads in the comms and in the magazines, the communities. So we've gone out there and targeted the local community, and we've seen a significant increase in our interest and our social media presence. We've actually saved money on that as well. So we're spending less on our social media, but actually we're seeing more hits. So it's about targeting the right audience.
Just a quick follow-up then. So I presume we do campaigns at certain times of the year and then we target it. And then out of that data we've got, do you now identify the areas where we've got perhaps not as many interested people, and then we can target campaigns to those specific areas around the county?
Yes, so we'll take feedback. So we will have regular audits on terms of where we're seeing that interest, and then we will target other areas if we're not getting an interest from that. So we're now kind of looking at figures that we can measure, that we can use to inform future marketing. So we've seen a significant increase, which has been significant in terms of our initial expressions. We did see a significant rise in 2020 to 2021. That was in the midst of the pandemic. Lots of people were kind of reflecting on their own personal life. We had 340 initial expressions of interest, but they weren't progressing. So although they were expressing an interest, they weren't progressing. This year we had 244 expressions of interest, but actually our conversion rate from initial expression of interest to approval has actually increased. So we're targeting the right areas. We're seeing an increase in that. So that's been really positive for us in fostering.
Thank you, Andrew. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, just really quickly, fostering friendly employers is a good thing. Lincolnshire County Council's fostering friendly employer, which gives some flexibilities to employees that choose to be foster carers about additional capacity to do training, a little bit of flexibility in time off. You know, so if the young person goes into crisis, like you'd say to a member of staff, yeah, go home, sort your son or daughter out. Yeah, go home, sort your foster son or daughter out, the child living with him. And we're encouraging district councils to become fostering friendly employers. So if you're interested, I'm happy to share some information with you, because East Lindsey and Boston have got on board. So just putting the challenge out there.
Councillor Matthews.
I heard our new Prime Minister described as a maths geek yesterday, and that must make me one. we recruited 20 and lost some. Some is just an interesting number, really. It's can be anything from 2 to infinity.
I think we reported 289 households, I believe, and we've now 27 mainstream households. We're now at 291, so our figures currently, although we've lost and we've recruited, we're actually 2 increase. So we're not losing and reducing our number of available fostering households. So although we've lost some, our retention, our recruitment has supported that retention of carers.
Can I
Yeah, please do.
Sorry, can I also just come in here?
Rebecca, could you just switch your mic off, please? Yeah, thank you.
If I could just also highlight that this is a highly competitive market that we're talking about. You know, you will be aware of independent fostering agencies. Lincolnshire County Council has recognised very clearly that we're operating in a competitive market, and that as such we have needed to really focus on our recruitment and understand exactly what's going on. And it's been quite a journey, Rebecca, you know, when I think back to a year ago to where we are now, and thinking about, you know, the differences that we've made in terms of that initial phone call that somebody makes right through to the point at which they're approved at panel. The offer to prospective foster carers is much greater. The response time is much more rapid in terms of those callbacks, and we learnt a lot from the auditing work that we completed. And we also bring in very early on foster carer champions and foster carers to support and provide that information so that we can support as best we can to try and ensure that we end up with a higher conversion rate and that people remain engaged. The other thing that we've done, and I think, Rebecca, you're probably thinking about it now, is we've developed a portal where people can track, a bit like when you're going for a mortgage, you can track where you are in that process. People can do exactly the same now, so they can see where they are. So we are in a very strong position in terms of our recruitment.
Yes, can I just add to that? I think one of the things from the audit and what we found was in terms of customer service and communication was key in terms of why people would choose Lincolnshire. So if somebody phoned up for initial inquiry, generally they may see another IFA or they may see a local authority and phone both. Actually, it's that initial customer service, that response that they get that makes them choose the provider. And I think that's something that we've worked really hard on. So we have developed with the comms teams the portal, so they are able to track everything. We allocate a foster carer champion who will also give an applicant a call back just to talk through fostering, so it's not always a professional, it's not corporate. You know, we've got foster carers who will talk to them about what fostering's like, and that's key because I think they're more interested in our foster carers and our foster carers' view than they are from us as a professional. We now allocate in stage 1 of their approval, and that's because they've got a contact that we can call them, we update them, we can take information, and that filters out some of the ones that wouldn't progress. So I think it's about being strong in terms of our support right from the onset, and I think we've really seen an improvement in that, which is again evidenced within our numbers in terms of conversion from initial inquiry to approval at panel.
Yes.
It was the ink spots who sang, "There are more questions than answers." I asked the question, you've recruited 20 and lost some. I understood that you've now got a surplus, so you recruited 22. But you also told me that you've increased or covered fostering placements to a number in the 200s. What does that mean? Does that mean a foster carer covers an average of 10 families? I didn't think that was the case. So I'm a bit confused now with the answer.
Would you mind asking the question again, please? Apologies.
Without the trimmings, yes. We recruited 20 and we lost some. That was my question. How many did we lose? We still didn't get the answer to how many we lost, but we might have a surplus of 2, so we might have recruited 22. But in the answer that Rebecca gave, she talked about fostering placement numbers and gave a number that we'd got an increase to something in the 200s. And I didn't understand how that related to my question. I can say it again, but I don't know how to say it.
Okay. I think the issue is we're possibly talking about 2 different periods of time. So if we deal with the period of time the annual report is concerned with, we recruited, well, at the end of March, we had 289 fostering households registered. And obviously there's a makeup of a number of those that would be able to provide mainstream placements. 57 of that number, of the 289, provided the connected persons placements, and 5 foster to adopt. But during that period, that overall period, we recruited 20 new mainstream households. However, within the number, we then lost 27 mainstream, and the reasons for that are set out on page 104. So family circumstances changing. Now, the picture today, I'm moving to today now, and I shouldn't be, but the picture today, we have 291 approved households with 30 temporary approvals of the Reg 24. Obviously, the number of placements that they will be able to provide or offer depends on the makeup of those fostering households. So, but for the purposes of the period of time that I'm reporting on in respect to this report, it was 289, and whilst it doesn't sound like a great growth, actually, we have more or less maintained. So it hasn't got tremendously, it hasn't got worse.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Cole.
Just another question then, following from what you were saying, Nicola, in terms of, so during 2020, obviously we had COVID and people then reflected, I think it might have been you actually, Rebecca, I can't remember which one, but you were talking about, you know, people were reflecting on their lives and what they wanted to do in terms of giving back and everything else. So what would your forecast be for the next sort of 12 months? Because obviously with cost of living crisis and everything else, are we expecting to see more pressures and challenges, particularly over the next few months?
I think that's something that we have to consider. I mean, I can give you the figures for today. So as of today, within this financial year, we've had 105 IEIs. So we are maintaining, whereas some local authorities have seen a dip, we are maintaining, and I think that's about our targeted marketing approach. So yeah, in terms of our current figures, we're on 105, and a panel, we have a number of 30 that we are expecting to approve within this financial year. So again, we are expecting an increase in our approvals. So yes, although you know yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Chairman. You say that it's very competitive with fostering with private agencies. If I were a potential fosterer, I would probably want to go with as many agencies as I could, be it a local authority or private, and keep myself on the books, for want of a better way of saying it, all the way up to when I was offered a child for fostering. And I wonder if we're aware that that is the case. So it's a case of whoever comes up first with availability says, I'll have that one, and then drops the others. Sorry, it might sound a bit light-humoured,
I can answer that.
But I don't mean it that way.
due to fostering regulations, you can only be approved with one agency or one authority, so you're not able to be registered with more than one authority at one time. So you can only register and be approved with one agency.
Yeah, Councillor Boothroyd.
Thank you. I said to myself I'd sit and listen at the back, but sometimes it's hard. With regards to the difference in what the council pays fostering households, how does that differ between ourselves and the private sector, so to speak?
I think it's fair to say in terms of some of the private sectors in terms pay an increased fee to foster carers. However, I think what initially on looking at that looks a high payment and can look attractive. However, the local authority pay the fostering allowance and additional allowances on top of that. So we pay for an exceptional holiday, we would pay for school uniforms, we would pay for an activity a week, we will pay birthday allowances. So there's lots of additional things that we as a local authority would pay that an independent agency doesn't. We also offer a retention payment for our foster carers annually, dependent on how long they've been approved. So again, that's a one-off payment that we would pay on top of that. So, but we're actually quite open. So the payments handbook is on our website. They're able to see what we offer. So although there's a difference in the salary or in terms of what looks like the fee, actually when we look at all the additional costs that we will pay, I would think that would be on balance.
Sorry, just to come back. No, that's reassuring, and obviously other meetings I've sat in, I've heard how that's been introduced and how successful that's been. It very much is. Sounds like the other children are missing out in some respects. I know that's not necessarily to do with this room, but it sounds like what we offer is quite comprehensive across the board, and I think that clearly needs to be sort of in our marketing if it hasn't been already, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Cook.
Just a final question from me then. Do we do a sort of a mystery shopper style thing from when a foster care is interested? And I use example, so this morning at 9:30, it took me 5 calls to get through on the main switchboard to get through to somebody to tell them I was going to be late for this meeting, which is a very, in my terms, that's poor quality actually, and that's 2 failed calls and everything else. So do we do a mystery shopper? We do. Yeah.
We do.
Okay, do we have any more questions? No? I move that we receive the report and statement of purpose presented and that we are satisfied with the efforts made by our fostering service in the past year and extend our thanks to our dedicated foster carers who give our children hopes and opportunities to achieve better outcomes and reach their potentials. I also ask that our comments from the discussions as recorded are taken under consideration by officers. That sounds a bit scripted. I sat in last year on the Teams meeting for our foster carers, and I must say, I think the phrase I used last time was blown away. I was so impressed, and some of the stories that I heard were super. So I just wanted to add that to the bits and say thank you. Can I ask that you raise your hand if you are in agreement? Thank you, that's unanimous. I'd like to propose that we have a comfort break if that suits everybody. Shall we say 10 minutes back at 1:45? Okay, that's great, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We have another fostering report coming up, but I just wanted to take advantage that we've only got Anne left now, who's got fostering experience. I did know Polly was going, but we couldn't get round quick enough. We put together just a couple of questions to give us a feel about fostering and how it works. And I know you gave them it earlier in the meeting, but I'd just like to ask a couple of the councillors if they could just ask some questions just to get a feel of how it works and get us informed. Could I start with Councillor Higgs, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Anne, the foster carer's role, do you find the integration of a foster child in with your family, and can you tell us some of the issues that you as you personally have found and hopefully overcome?
Sorry, we obviously just need to be a little bit careful about
Yeah,
how,
no, that's
but you
fine.
appreciate that. Thank you.
That's fine. My experience, I didn't start fostering till my own children were in their teenage years. So until I felt that they were confident and settled and sorted enough in themselves that it would fit with us. Having said that, most of my fostering has been teenagers, so they've been children of a similar age to my own. It is a challenge in a number of ways. Time, obviously, because I'm a working parent as well. So time is a huge one. Focus on the children. It's about making sure that our birth children are included and feel they have some focus on them and that they get the time and support that they need. And again, you know, we have the Supportive Superstars, which is a service that is about foster carers' birth children. So there is support for our children too. As part of our annual review as foster carers, our supervising social worker always speaks to the birth children to see how they're checking with them and check that it's something that they still want to be doing. So there's lots of different avenues for support. It can be a challenge if there are personality clashes. If you've got a child who is being aggressive, verbally or physically. We've had to manage young people who have a history of stealing, and so when they're coming into the house, it's then, okay, so how do we manage this? How do we make sure that you feel safe? So there's lots of safeguards that we have to put in place. And some of the challenges are not specific to fostering. They're things that if you have multiple children, lots of parents have multiple birth children and they don't get on. There are personality issues. Some of my friends, their children hate each other. But it's about the skills that we have as a foster carer then about developing relationships and just making sure that everybody feels they're heard, that everybody feels they have their time and their opportunity, and the safety. So we have safety plans in place in the home. We have guidelines, that a safety plan that we revisit every time a new child comes in. Is there something different that we need to put in place to make sure that our children are safe, as well as the children in our care?
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Higgs.
Thank you, Anne. I'm full of admiration for anybody that wants to look after multiple teenagers because they're the most selfish people in the world. And you must get to the point that your birth children say you're being unfair to us and you're not giving us sufficient time. And a foster child, teenager, will probably say exactly the same. So well done and thank you very much.
Thank you. I can honestly say I haven't ever had that, and I don't know whether that's... My children are fantastic, and one of my daughter actually works in one of our residential homes in Lincolnshire, because she's got so much from fostering that's now what she is doing herself. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. We had 4, but we're only going to go for 2 questions. So if I can ask Councillor Matthews, if you just... Thank you.
I was intrigued with what you said earlier, because clearly, and I don't want to revisit it other than that we know what we're talking about. But it must mean that you're coming up with providing support on issues that you haven't experienced, because as a parent myself, you have these children come to you at no days, and they grow with you through 10 days, 10 months, 10 years, 20 years. And you have had the experience of where you sit in the dialogue with them because you've got that shared experience. How complicated is it to start a conversation when you haven't got that shared experience? Because I was thinking that you talked about your own natural birth children, and I imagine they're part of your council of support as well, because you probably ask them about questions. But how complicated is it having someone who you haven't got that long trusting relationship built up over many years to have hard and complicated discussions with, almost, and then offer and take advice or not take advice? I haven't expressed my question very well, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
It's about coming in from a place of wanting to listen and honesty, openness, being willing to hear actually what the young people are saying, and sometimes being reflective on what they're saying rather than demanding and not questioning. So when young people come in, we offer a lot of respite. So we have young people coming in for one night. We have people coming in young people coming in for an emergency. I have very little information when a young person comes into my house about. On lots of occasions, we know very little other than their name, date of birth, and where it is they're coming from. And I might know a bit of their story for the last few hours about why they've ended up coming to us on that day. So the beginning is then, you're here, you're in a safe place. If you want to talk, we're willing to listen. But if you don't want to, that's fine. I've been told bits of information about you. If you want to know anything about us, you ask. And so going in and building that relationship, but coming from a place of being prepared to listen. And absolutely going back to my own children and saying, do you know what? I've been told this kid's coming with this bit. I know nothing about that. Fill me in on the details. What do I need to know? And very often the advice from them is, don't ask me, ask them. It's their life, it's their story. And coming from a place of non-judgment as well. And that actually is really important, going back to the conversation we were having earlier. My situation has been very different to theirs. My situation is very different to their parents' situation. So it's always coming from a place of support without judgment.
Thank you, Anne. I think that is informative. Yeah. Okay, so we move on to agenda item 8, which is the Fostering Quarterly Performance Report, Quarter 1. This item on pages 153 to 170 of the pack provides the panel with an overview of activity within the fostering service over Quarter 1. The report will be presented once again by Nicola and Rebecca. The panel is invited to consider and comment on the contents of the quarterly performance report for fostering and to approve this report as an accurate overview of the fostering service. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I hope you've all read the report, and I think we've kind of covered a lot of the information that's in the Quarter 1 report within our previous discussions. I just wanted to kind of go back on a couple of things, and Anne's just kind of reminded me in terms of our supportive superstars and the value of that. I think last year we did a audit on some of our foster carers who had left, who had been newly approved but didn't stay with us some time. And some of that feedback that we got from that was the impact that it had had on their birth children. And we realised that that is significant. So from that, we relaunched the Supportive Superstars. We've introduced our birth children preparation course, and we recognise that it is about a fostering household. It's not about fostering carers, adults, it's about the household. So we realised that we really need to support those birth children in order to make a successful placement and in order for fostering households to work. So we've done a lot of work with regards to our birth children within our families. So I just wanted to kind of pick up on that as well. The other thing that we've kind of done within Q1 as well is we've looked at our family finding, and we launched our family finders events, and that is to support our permanence campaign and to support some of our older children coming back into a foster family or stepping down from a residential placement into a foster family. So we held 2 events last year, and we've held another event recently which we saw some success in terms of we've managed to link 2 sibling groups. We've got 1 young person that's been permanently matched. So that again has been a huge success, and I just wanted to kind of just talk a little bit about the family finding events and how that is supporting us with our placement stability, looking at how we support carers, offering regular respite to our children and young people who may be in a residential setting. As we say, we always recognise that every child is able to be in a foster placement, and it's how we support them to achieve that. We've also invested highly in our placement support workers who are all trained in therapeutic support, so therapy, and we are proactive in supporting foster carers. So what we don't want to do is be reactive in terms of when a foster carer or a young person is struggling, that we're then putting support in place. We want to identify, and that's helped with the integration of the valuing care tool within the children care teams and within the fostering service. So we're identifying children's needs as well as foster carers' abilities, so their skills and knowledge. So what we've found really helpful is using that tool when we're looking at perhaps where a placement might be a little wobbly in terms of, okay, so where are the areas of need that we need to support our foster carer to support this young person in? So we've addressed that, and we're being more proactive in terms of what we can offer in terms of our placement support. So we're working in conjunction with our complex care team, and we're looking at how we can grow our therapeutic support to foster carers. So that's an area that we're really proud of. As I say, we've invested heavily in our placement support workers who are doing very in-depth work with our foster carers, offering that support that we need at an early stage to try and prevent any placement breakdowns. And I think we're seeing that in terms of our placement stability. We've now got a placement support worker that sits on our duty desk that, again, if any calls come in where there's an issue, they're there, they're available, and we can offer support. So I think I'm really proud of that. And I think, for me, I'm really proud of our fostering community, because without our foster carers, they all pull together, they support each other. We've got a number of WhatsApp groups, which is our phone groups, which is supportive groups, and I can say that our foster carers are on there 24/7. So if a foster carer will put in a message in the middle of the night to say, actually, I'm really struggling with this, you can guarantee that there's a response from another foster carer within minutes to say, okay, this is fine, I've struggled with this is what we can support you with. So I think we've really invested in our community, and that's really helped in terms of our placement stability. And I think, again, during this difficult period of COVID, I think we are seeing an improvement, a positive improvement in our retention and recruitment. And again, I think that's down to the support of our foster carers who've stuck with us in some very difficult and very challenging times. And again, I just want to say that's been a real positive for us as a foster service. Nicola, would you like to add anything to that?
Thank you, Rebecca. I think the only other point I'd like to raise is really highlighting the issue of this value in care tool. And this is something that really is becoming further embedded in fostering. And this isn't just a tool that's used in terms of tracking the needs of a young person, but this is about looking at the where there may be any gaps of learning for any foster carers. So we're able to target much more clearly, particularly around placement stability. And as you'll see from the Q1 report, we're ambitious in terms of further embedding this tool into our kinship assessments and our special guardianship assessments also. Again, this is about being able to provide clarity early on to look at specific needs so that we can meet those needs through those periods of assessment and potentially post-order. And again, just to reiterate, in terms of the retention again and the recruitment activity, the support from our Caring to Learn champions, our foster carer champions and supervising social workers who are all part of those courses has been invaluable. I don't think there's anything else that I particularly want to highlight. I suppose I would just want to highlight one success from my own area with a young person who had a number of placement moves and was on the brink, it's fair to say, Rachel, of a residential placement. Significant support was provided by the foster carers, and I'm really pleased to be able to report that this young person will be remaining with their foster carers, and they have worked incredibly hard in supporting this young person along with us. So in terms of, for me personally, seeing situations where young people who potentially have a trajectory where they are heading one direction, and actually to see the difference that a foster carer can make to that young person has been phenomenal. And I will be bottling it and looking at it and distilling it across the community. So really, I think those are all the things that I'd want to say in terms of this quarter. So thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Do we have any questions? No. From a personal point of view, unfortunately, I can't keep claiming I'm new anymore, but I've been doing this over a year. And I remember the previous reports, and I have a marketing background, and I was looking at those reports thinking, I don't see this, why isn't this happening, why is that happening? And I think one of the biggest changes I'm seeing is that we're marketing, and more importantly, we're looking at the results of marketing, and we're able now to target it better, or it appears that we might have done before, but it didn't come over as that. So I think that was the biggest thing for me from my point of view. I read this report and I came away with an optimistic feel. I felt things, having the two reports side by side, I felt things were improving and getting better. So thank you both very much. So that concludes the discussion. I move that we receive this quarterly report and update provided, and that we are satisfied with the overall activities undertaken, and that we ratify this report as an accurate overview of the fostering service for Q1. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in agreement, please? Thank you, and then that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So we move on to item 9, corporate parenting, children in care and care leaver strategy priorities action plan update. This is a verbal update on the corporate parenting, children in care leaver strategy priorities action plan following the information and discussion sessions held on the 31st of August 2022. Andrew Morris, Corporate Parenting Manager, who led on this session, will now give us an update. The panel is invited to receive this verbal report. Thank you, Andrew. Sorry, Andy.
It's a snappy title, isn't it? really short and snappy. Well, I'll say I won't keep it too long. I think everybody, the vast majority of people in this room have fed into the corporate parenting, the children care and care leaver strategy now, be it through the group, one-to-one. I had another one-to-one with a counsellor from Children's Scrutiny yesterday. The strategy is now going to go to children and young people scrutiny in a couple of weeks' time, and it's also going to go to CLT, to the corporate leadership team, to kind of get that whole organisational buy-in to the strategy. Any feedback from members has been incorporated into it. I know from the engagement event on the 31st, the main things members really wanted including, there was one about education, the statutory responsibility to go to school. So we've kind of woven that into the strategy a little bit more explicitly. And the other one was around geography. You know, we talked about the geography of Lincolnshire and some of the challenges that our young people face, and how we can help those young people overcome challenges of transport. You know, sometimes kids have to get a taxi to a bus stop to catch the bus to school. You know, those beautiful things about living in Lincolnshire. So it was well received by members, well received by officers, and it was executive DLT yesterday where Councillor Bradwell agreed that it will be an executive councillor's decision, and it will go to the executive so that the whole council can own the corporate parenting responsibilities in our children care and care leavers. And then we're going to be launching in November with an event, and I'd like to invite everybody here to come to that event, and I'm sure we can have a look at the strategy and see if we can get some young people there as well to come and talk about some of their stories. I still think the piece of work that came out of it that we need to kind of push on a bit more is some of the partners, you know, a little bit more proactive attendance and participation around this forum of some of our partnerships, some of our other partner agencies. And I guess the other thing is that kind of that whole council approach is how do we, you know, some of the conversations we've been having this morning about business and education, employment, how do we get all those branches and the many kind of fingers of the council into all the pies so that we can get benefits for our young people from all the different directorates, and hopefully CLT have in sight the strategy. I know the chief exec's really keen on having a briefing completed with all assistant directors from all the different departments, so all the assistant directors from all the different avenues within the council can own the care leavers and looked after children's strategy for the next 3 years. And I think that's about it. We're almost there. So that's it.
Any comments or questions? Thank you, Andrew. I have to keep changing because he thinks he's being told off if I call him Andrew. So I move that we receive this verbal update and request that any additional information is shared with members in the future. Can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in agreement, please? Thank you again. That's unanimous. So we move on to item 10, which is the panel work programme. This item on pages 171 to 174 of the agenda pack enables the panel to comment on the content of its own work programme. The report will be presented by Chiara, Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So the work programme is being reviewed at each meeting of the Corporate Parenting Panel to ensure that the contents are still relevant and will add value to the work of the panel. So for our next meeting, which will be on the 10th of November, we have Children in Care Performance Measures for Quarter 2, Children in Care Annual Report for 2021-2022. We will be receiving the Independent Reviewing Service 6-month report. We will also receive a report on Regulation 44 Independent Visiting Service, which is also a 6-monthly report. We shall be receiving the Fostering Quality Performance Report and the Private Fostering Annual Report and Statement of Purpose. In terms of items to be programmed in the future, there is a list of items on page 173, to which I will be adding items as discussed today, one being an item around, give me 2 seconds, and I shall find it. Potential presentation and paper to be invited on outcomes in terms of criminal activity and the pathways that our children in care follow. So that concludes my update to you and the panel. Thank you very much indeed.
I'll start with Kieran. Yes.
Yeah, just excuse me, Chiara. I note that John Harris's name is down beside a couple of these items on the agenda. And I'm just looking to my social care colleagues here that whether John should have his name on those. As I understand it, John is leading on adoption, the Regional Adoption Agency. So I don't know whose name should be there, but I think that... sorry, go on.
I believe that should be Deborah Crawford.
So I think there was also the question Councillor Matthews asked around the performance measures but I know you've already sent me, but I don't know if we should add that to the next meeting, because that might take a little bit of time, but in terms of planning, we could bring that agenda item back about the conversation with the DfE.
Councillor Matthews.
Thank you, Andy, for raising that. My point is that Janice had said that we would already start to reflect this in the next turn, and it hasn't happened in this turn, obviously, that she was going to explore if there was some way they could put a mitigation report in addition to the statutory requirements that actually painted the picture in a different light, and that hasn't happened. So I wonder if it's one and the same thing now, but I had requested it last time. It's not happened in this quarterly report, so you're clearly reporting, or whoever's reporting, what has to be reported. But I'm asking, can we also have a report of what you can't report in those constructs? And I thought we'd got either that Janice was going to tell us how they could report it or would report it. So if that just could go through.
Any further comments or questions? The only one I wanted to add in was the regional adoption area report back on who, what, where, when, how, please. I then move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 171 to 74 of the agenda pack and added items from today's meeting's discussions. Can I ask you to raise your hand if you're in agreement, please? Okay, thank you very much. That's unanimous. So the final thing is to say it is 12:15 and this now concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you everybody for your input. Thank you.